How far can love go in the wild? Can a predator beg for help from the very species it fears most, humans? And if it does, would you believe it's real or call it instinct gone wrong? It was early morning in the thick forests of Madagascar. The mist hung low, wrapping the trees in a soft white veil. Birds had just started calling, but the forest felt strangely tense, as if something had gone wrong. Ranger Malik was making his usual rounds, his boots crunching lightly on damp leaves. He had worked in these forests for years, yet that morning felt different. He didn't know why his gut told him to stay alert. A faint cry echoed from the eastern ridge, low, broken, almost desperate. Malik froze. It wasn't a human voice, but it wasn't a normal animal call either. It sounded like pain. He followed the sound, pushing through thick undergrowth, until he saw movement in the distance, a reddish-brown figure pacing restlessly near a fallen tree. At first, Malik thought it was a civet, but as he stepped closer, his heart skipped. It was a male fossa, a predator rarely seen this close to humans. The creature stopped pacing when it saw him. Instead of fleeing, it took a few steps forward. Malik raised his hand slowly, signaling peace, but the fossa didn't attack or retreat. It just stared at him, eyes wide, breathing fast. Then it did something no wild animal ever did. It growled softly and turned away, walking a few steps before looking back, as if asking him to follow. Malik's breath caught. "What are you trying to show me?" He whispered under his breath. He followed carefully, his senses sharp. The fossa led him deeper into the forest, moving fast, but stopping every few meters to check if Malik was still behind. The path was steep and wet, and the ranger slipped more than once, but curiosity overpowered fear. There was something urgent in the animal's behavior, something almost human. After about 10 minutes, the fossa stopped beside a cluster of vines near a rocky pit. It let out a low whimper and looked at Malik. The ranger stepped closer, and his heart clenched. Below the rocks, trapped halfway in a narrow crevice, was a female fossa. Her back legs were pinned under a fallen branch, her fur coated in mud, her breathing shallow. "Oh no," Malik murmured. "She's hurt." The male fossa moved closer to her but didn't touch her. Instead, it looked at Malik again, almost pleading with its eyes. The message was clear: help her. Malik dropped to his knees and inspected the pit. The branch was heavy but not impossible to lift. Still, one wrong move could make the rocks collapse further. He took out his radio, but there was no signal. The forest canopy was too thick. He was alone. He took a slow breath. "All right, buddy. I'll help her. But you need to stay calm." The male fossa growled low, but not in threat, more like fear. Malik knew he was taking a risk. One sudden move could trigger the animal's instinct to attack. Still, he couldn't walk away. He started removing smaller rocks first, clearing a path. Each sound made the female fossa flinch, but she didn't have the strength to move. The male paced nervously, sometimes growling at Malik, then whimpering when he stopped. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Sweat ran down Malik's face. His hands bled from sharp rocks. Finally, he pushed the fallen branch with all his strength, and it rolled aside. The female let out a weak cry, moving slightly. Malik froze, panting. "You're free," he said softly, even though she couldn't understand him. But what happened next made his heart race. The male didn't attack, didn't run. Instead, he walked slowly toward Malik, his head lowered. He sniffed the air around him, then turned to his mate and gently nudged her side. The female lifted her head weakly, eyes blinking. The sound that came next was something Malik would never forget. A faint chirping call, like a thank you. Malik felt his throat tighten. "You're welcome," he whispered, voice trembling. He watched as the male tried to help her stand, but she fell again. Her leg was twisted badly. She couldn't walk. The male looked at Malik again, that same pleading look, as if asking him to continue helping. Malik shook his head slightly. "I can't. Not without my team." He looked at the injured fossa, then at the thick canopy above. He had one choice: stay there and hope for backup, or try carrying her himself. The forest grew darker as clouds rolled in. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Malik could smell rain coming. He wiped his forehead, looking between the two animals. The male stood protectively near his mate, refusing to leave her side. Malik could feel the weight of time pressing on him. Could he really carry a wild predator, injured, frightened, and unpredictable, through the jungle alone? Or would he risk letting her die right there, in front of the one creature that had trusted him against its instincts? He took one last breath, looked into the Fossa's eyes, and made his decision. Malik bent down, his hands shaking slightly as he looked at the injured female Fossa. Her breathing was faint but steady. The male still stood close, tail twitching, eyes locked on Malik as if gauging his next move. The tension between man and predator was sharp, yet something invisible connected them, a fragile thread of trust built not from words, but from instinct. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, turning the earth to slick mud. Malik knew staying there wasn't an option. If the pit flooded, the female wouldn't survive. He had to act now. He slid his hands under her, careful not to startle her, but she whimpered, baring her teeth in pain. The male growled instantly, a low, trembling sound that made the hair rise on Malik's neck. He froze. "Easy," he whispered. "I'm not hurting her. I'm trying to help." For a moment, no one moved. Not the ranger, not the Fossa. Then, as if understanding, the male backed off a few steps, eyes still wary but no longer hostile. Malik took that as permission. He carefully lifted the injured animal, her body limp and warm in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, but every movement made her wince. He cradled her close, wrapping her partially in his jacket to keep her dry. The rain poured harder, soaking through his clothes. The forest echoed with distant thunder, the calls of frightened birds, and the rhythmic sound of raindrops striking leaves. The male Fossa followed closely behind as Malik started down the slope, his boots slipping in mud. He had nearly 2 miles to cover before reaching the ranger outpost, but the terrain was rough, and every step was a battle. The male stayed near, weaving in and out of the trees, watching him closely. Sometimes Malik caught a glimpse of his glowing eyes through the rain, silent, vigilant, almost protective. He had never imagined walking side by side with a predator like this. It was surreal, terrifying, and deeply humbling. The trail grew darker as the storm thickened. Malik's radio crackled once, a faint sound of static but no signal. He tried calling out, "Base, this is Ranger Malik. I need assistance. I've got an injured animal, possible Fossa, female." The radio hissed and went dead. He cursed under his breath. Of course, the forest floor had turned into a shallow stream. Malik's boots sank deep with every step. The female Fossa stirred weakly, her head twitching. "Hang in there," he said softly. "We're almost out." But even he didn't know if that was true. A flash of lightning lit the sky, followed by a deafening crack. A massive branch broke off a nearby tree and crashed down just behind him. Malik stumbled forward, losing his footing, barely keeping hold of the animal. The male Fossa let out a sharp hiss, sprinting around him and stopping ahead, growling at something unseen. Malik froze again, scanning the shadows. Something moved, low to the ground, slithering fast through the flooded brush. It was a snake, a massive boa, likely disturbed by the storm. Its thick, scaled body shimmered in the lightning flashes as it moved closer, tongue flicking. Malik took a step back, tightening his grip on the injured Fossa. The male Fossa arched its back, fur bristling, teeth bared. The ranger had no weapon except a utility knife and a stick he picked up earlier. He knew boas didn't usually attack humans, but an injured animal in distress could provoke it. The snake raised its head, eyes gleaming. The male Fossa lunged first, snarling, biting at its side. The snake whipped around, wrapping part of its body around the male's hind legs. Malik didn't think, he acted. He dropped the female gently beside a rock and grabbed the branch, swinging hard. The stick cracked against the snake's scales but barely fazed it. The Fossa yelped, clawing frantically. Malik struck again, this time aiming for the head. The snake loosened slightly. He struck again, once, twice, until the snake recoiled, sliding back into the dark undergrowth, leaving behind swirling water and the sound of panting. Malik knelt beside the male Fossa. It limped slightly but seemed mostly unharmed. "You're okay," he whispered, breathing heavily. "We're all okay." The male looked at him for a moment, soaked and trembling, then turned to nudge his mate again. She was still alive, eyes half open, chest rising and falling. Malik sat there for a moment, trying to steady himself. The rain had started to slow, though the forest still dripped and whispered. He was cold, exhausted, and covered in mud, but there was no going back. He stood up again, lifting the female in his arms once more. The male followed without hesitation, limping but determined. After another hour of struggling through mud and vines, the trees began to thin. Malik recognized the familiar ridge above the river, the border of the Rangers' research zone. If he could reach the small wooden bridge there, the station wasn't far. But his arms were weak now, muscles screaming from the effort. Halfway across the ridge, his foot slipped on wet moss. He fell hard, sliding a few feet down the slope. Pain shot up his shoulder as he hit the ground, but somehow he kept his grip on the fossa. The male rushed toward him, emitting a sharp, panicked sound. Malik gritted his teeth and stood, ignoring the pain. "I'm fine," he muttered, mostly to himself. Not giving up now. At last, through the fading rain, he saw it, the outline of the ranger's cabin, half hidden by ferns. Relief flooded him. "We made it," he breathed. "We actually made it." As he approached, he noticed something strange. The cabin door was open. He frowned. That wasn't right. He always locked it before patrol. He stepped inside cautiously. The room was dark except for the dim light of a solar lamp flickering on the wall. Papers were scattered on the floor. Someone had been there. Before he could process it, a voice called from behind. "Malik!" He spun around. A tall man emerged from the trees, holding a flashlight. It was Ranger Elias, his partner. "Where the hell have you been?" Elias demanded, eyes wide as he saw the animal in Malik's arms. "What is that, a fossa?" Malik let out a breath of relief. "She's injured. I found her trapped. Her mate led me there. We need to treat her now." Elias blinked. "Wait, her mate led you there? You're saying a fossa guided you?" "I know how it sounds," Malik said quickly, laying the female on a blanket. "But it's true. He wouldn't leave me alone until I followed him. And look at this. She's alive because of him." Elias crouched beside the animal, inspecting her leg. "Dislocated, maybe fractured. We can splint it, but she'll need care." He glanced at Malik, frowning. "And the male? Where is he?" Malik pointed toward the trees. The male was just outside, watching them through the half-open door, eyes glowing faintly in the light. He wasn't moving, just standing guard. Elias shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen that kind of behavior before. They're supposed to be solitary. This is—" He trailed off. "Different," Malik finished softly. "It's different." They worked through the night, cleaning the wound, bandaging the leg, and giving the female water. The male stayed outside, circling the cabin, but never entering. Every time Malik stepped out, the fossa would lower his head slightly, a strange gesture, like acknowledgement. Hours later, when the storm finally passed, the forest fell into an eerie calm. The sky turned grey-blue as dawn approached. Malik sat near the door, sipping cold tea, watching the male fossa through the mist. He couldn't help but wonder what was going on in that creature's mind. Why had it trusted him? Why had it risked everything to seek human help? Elias joined him. "You think they'll survive?" Malik didn't answer right away. "If she heals, maybe, but they'll need to be released far from here. Too much human scent now. It'll draw other predators." Elias nodded slowly. "You realize, if this story gets out, no one's going to believe you. A wild Fossa asking for help? They'll call it instinct or coincidence. Let them, Malik said quietly. I saw it in his eyes, Elias. That wasn't instinct. That was something else. The two men sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the male Fossa began pacing again, restless. The female stirred, her eyes opening a little wider. Malik stood, moved closer, and smiled faintly. She's waking up. He didn't notice Elias frowning behind him. Malik, he said slowly, there's something else. When I got here before you, I noticed tracks around the cabin, not just from Fossas, something bigger, maybe a predator following them. Malik turned sharply. A predator? Elias nodded. Could be a large python or a stray pack of dogs. I'm not sure, but whatever it was, it came close. Very close. Before Malik could respond, the male Fossa suddenly growled, loud and deep, facing the tree line. The sound wasn't random. It was a warning. Malik's pulse spiked. He stepped to the doorway, scanning the shadows. The forest, moments ago calm, now felt alive with movement. Leaves rustled. Something was there. Elias grabbed his flashlight, but before he could switch it on, a sharp hiss echoed through the darkness. Malik froze. That sound. It was the boa, the same one. Somehow, it had followed them. The male Fossa leapt forward, vanishing into the undergrowth. The forest exploded with noise. Snarls, hisses, crashing branches. Malik and Elias exchanged a glance, then ran outside, flashlights cutting through the mist. What they saw made Malik's heart pound all over again. The male Fossa was tangled with the giant snake, both thrashing violently in the mud. The snake had wrapped part of its body around the Fossa's midsection, squeezing hard. Malik grabbed a long stick and rushed forward, shouting, "Elias, help me!" Elias hesitated for a split second, then joined in. Together they tried prying the coils loose. The snake's muscles rippled, stronger than anything Malik had ever felt. The Fossa clawed furiously, biting wherever it could reach. The sound of struggle filled the clearing, until one final swing of Malik's stick connected with the snake's head. It went still. For a few seconds, everything went silent. The rain, the wind, even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Malik knelt beside the Fossa, heart racing. The animal was breathing heavily, blood on its side but still alive. Elias looked at the snake's body, disbelief on his face. That thing followed them all this way. It must have been hunting her before you found them. Malik nodded slowly. And he kept her safe the whole time. The male Fossa blinked weakly, then turned his gaze toward the cabin, toward his injured mate, who now whimpered softly from inside. Malik felt a lump rise in his throat. The creature had risked everything, not for food, not for territory, but for love. Elias broke the silence. We can treat his wounds too. But Malik, he hesitated. You know we can't keep them here forever. The officials will come. They'll want to study them, maybe separate them. Malik's expression hardened. No, not after what they've been through. We'll get them both to safety, together. Elias sighed. That's not protocol. Then forget the protocol, Malik said quietly, eyes fixed on the injured Fossa. Some things are more important than rules. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of wet earth and survival. Inside the cabin, the female Fossa blinked slowly, her breathing easier now. For the first time that night, Malik allowed himself to believe they might all make it through. But deep in the forest, where the shadows never fully slept, unseen eyes watched from the dark, patient, waiting. The wild was never done, testing those who dared to care. Morning crept over the drenched forest, soft rays of sunlight slicing through the mist that still hung low between the trees. The night storm had left everything glistening and heavy with moisture. The air smelled of wet bark and earth, thick enough to taste. Malik hadn't slept. He sat on the cabin floor beside the injured female Fossa, his eyes fixed on her slow breathing. He'd changed her bandage again during the night and checked her temperature with gentle hands. Her pulse had grown stronger. That gave him a little hope. The male Fossa rested just outside the door, half-curled under a fern, his reddish-brown coat darkened by mud and blood. He hadn't left her side even once. Occasionally he would lift his head, sniff the air, or stare into the woods as if waiting for something. Malik watched him through the open doorway. There was intelligence in that animal's eyes, not the instinctual alertness of a predator, but something deeper, something aware. Elias brewed a pot of bitter coffee, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "if the officials at the reserve hear about this, they'll send a capture team. 2 Fossas, a bonded pair, showing social behavior like this. It's rare. They'll want to study them, tag them, maybe keep them in controlled conditions." Malik rubbed his eyes. "I know, and that's exactly what I don't want. They belong out there." "Malik," Elias said carefully, "we can't just release them without permission. You know the regulations. You'd lose your post if they find out." "I'd rather lose my post than betray them," Malik said firmly. "He came to me because he trusted me. I can't repay that by locking them in a cage." Elias sighed. "You're letting emotion lead." Malik gave a tired smile. "Maybe, but maybe that's what this place needs once in a while, a little emotion." They sat in silence after that. The only sound, the soft breathing of the animals and the drip of rainwater from the cabin roof. The forest outside had grown calm, deceptively so. Yet Malik couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was still out there. Last night's attack by the Biwa had been too close, too precise. It was almost as if the snake had been stalking them for longer than they realized. As the day brightened, Elias suggested fetching supplies from the outpost. Antibiotics, more bandages, maybe a tranquilizer gun just in case. Malik hesitated to let him go alone, but Elias insisted. "You stay with them," he said, adjusting his backpack. "Keep the door closed. I'll be back by sundown." After Elias disappeared into the trees, Malik checked the female's bandage again. She was stable, breathing normally now. He smiled faintly, whispering, "You're a fighter. You'll walk again, I promise." Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. The male had stood up, staring intently toward the tree line. His ears twitched, muscles tense. Malik followed his gaze, but saw nothing. "Relax," he said softly. "It's just the forest waking up." But even as he said it, the air shifted. The forest didn't feel awake. It felt watchful. An hour passed. Malik decided to check the perimeter, leaving the female inside. He walked slowly, eyes scanning for tracks. The rain had washed most prints away, but near the ridge he noticed something strange. Claw marks in the mud, much larger than a fossa's. He crouched down, running his fingers through them. 4 distinct toes, heavy pressure points. Not a snake, not a fossa. Something else. He straightened up slowly, his senses on high alert. Then he heard it. A distant rustling followed by a low growl that made his stomach twist. He turned sharply, flashlight in hand, scanning the brush. Nothing, just dripping leaves. But the feeling wouldn't leave him, the feeling of being watched. Back at the cabin, the male fossa had moved inside for the first time. He stood near his mate, tail flicking nervously. Malik closed the door behind him, keeping one hand on his utility knife. He wasn't sure why, but his instinct screamed caution. Time passed slowly. The forest outside grew quiet again, almost too quiet. Even the birds had stopped calling. Malik tried the radio, still no signal. He felt trapped between responsibility and fear. He poured a bit of water into a bowl and pushed it toward the female. She lifted her head slightly, lapped at it, then rested again. The male watched her tenderly. Malik couldn't look away. That kind of devotion was rare, even among humans. Suddenly a sharp thump hit the side of the cabin. Malik jumped. The male fossa hissed, darting toward the sound. Another thump, this time louder. Malik grabbed his flashlight and edged toward the window. Something was moving outside, circling the cabin. He caught a glimpse of yellow eyes in the dim light. Too high off the ground to be a snake. His chest tightened. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." A shadow passed across the window, sleek, muscular, silent. Then came the sound of claws scraping against wood. Malik's pulse quickened. The male fossa let out a warning growl, body low and ready. Whatever was out there, it wasn't afraid of them. The door rattled once. Malik raised his knife, heart pounding. He could hear slow breathing just beyond the wall, heavy, measured. Then a sudden crack. The wooden shutter splintered. Through the gap, Malik saw the unmistakable face of a Fossa, but larger, older, scarred. A wild male, the intruder snarled, eyes locked on the injured female inside. Malik understood instantly. This was about territory. The newcomer must have followed them, drawn by her scent. The male beside him growled fiercely, baring his teeth, stepping between the intruder and his mate. Malik realized he was standing in the middle of a wild standoff. The larger Fossa leapt at the window, slamming against it hard. The whole cabin shook. Malik shouted, "Hey, get back!" But it was useless. The injured female whimpered, dragging herself weakly backward. Her mate lunged forward, claws digging into the wooden floor, snarling. The two males locked eyes through the broken shutter, their growls overlapping like thunder. Malik had no gun, only his voice. "Stop it, enough!" he yelled, trying to distract them. But the wild male smashed again at the frame, splinters flying. Malik knew it was only a matter of time before the door gave in. He needed to act fast. He spotted Elias's tranquilizer kit on the shelf, a dart gun with one loaded shot. Malik grabbed it, aimed at the shattered window, and fired. The dart struck the intruder's shoulder. The Fossa roared, retreating into the brush, vanishing into the shadows. Malik stood frozen, breathing hard. Silence returned, broken only by the rain dripping from the roof. He looked at the male Fossa beside him. The animal was still trembling, teeth bared, fur standing on end. Slowly, Malik lowered his hand. "It's over," he said softly. "You protected her." The Fossa blinked, then turned to his mate, nuzzling her gently. Malik felt a strange ache in his chest watching them. That was no ordinary bond. It was something sacred, wild yet pure. Hours passed before Elias returned, soaked from the trek. When Malik told him what happened, Elias's face went pale. "You fired the tranquilizer? Alone? Malik, that's dangerous. If it was a dominant male, he'll come back once it wears off." Malik nodded. "I know, but I couldn't let him hurt them." Elias exhaled sharply. "Then we have no choice. We need to move them, now." Before nightfall, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher from a tarp and bamboo rods. Malik gently lifted the injured female, securing her carefully. The male followed them closely, occasionally whining softly. They trekked toward the transport trail that led deeper into the reserve, toward a hidden rehabilitation site few people knew about. The forest was eerily quiet as they walked. Malik kept glancing behind, half expecting to see yellow eyes in the shadows. Once he thought he heard rustling, but when he turned, nothing was there. Still, the unease didn't leave him. As they reached the riverbank, Elias stopped to rest. "We'll cross here," he said. "Then we're close." Malik knelt beside the stretcher, checking the bandage again. The female stirred, blinking faintly. He smiled. "You're strong. Just a little more." But then, from across the river came a sound that froze the blood in his veins. A long, low growl echoing through the trees. Elias looked up sharply. "Don't tell me it's him," Malik said quietly. The tranquilizer wore off. The growl grew louder. Branches snapped. The same scarred male Fossa appeared on the opposite bank, eyes locked on them. His movements were slower now, but determined. Malik stood between him and the stretcher. "You're not getting to her," he muttered. Elias raised the tranquilizer gun. "One shot left." "Wait," Malik said, holding up his hand. "If we shoot again, it'll only make him angrier. Let me try something." Elias stared. "Try what?" "He's wild!" Malik took a cautious step forward, eyes fixed on the animal. The male snarled, muscles coiled. Malik spoke softly, his voice steady. "You had your chance to kill her. And you didn't. You just wanted her back. But look, she's alive. She's safe. You don't need to fight." The scarred Fossa tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand. The male beside Malik stepped forward too, growling low. The two stared at each other across the river. Rivals, but something in their stances changed. The tension began to fade, replaced by an almost silent understanding. Then, without warning, a distant explosion echoed through the forest. Both Fossas flinched. Elias swore under his breath. "That came from the south side." Poachers! Malik's stomach dropped. They're too close. We need to move now. The scarred Fossa turned and disappeared into the forest. Malik watched it vanish, then hoisted the stretcher again. Come on, he said to Elias. If the poachers are near, we're all in danger. They pushed forward along the riverbank, the forest now filled with distant shouts and the faint smell of smoke. The male Fossa stayed close, his ears twitching at every sound. Malik's mind raced, poachers setting traps, maybe burning to drive animals out. If they reached this area, the injured female wouldn't survive. When they finally reached the hidden station, Malik nearly collapsed from exhaustion. They secured the animals inside a reinforced enclosure, dimly lit, but safe. He sat on the ground, breathing hard. The male pressed against the bars, watching him silently. Elias locked the door. We'll stay here tonight. The poachers won't find this place easily. Malik nodded, eyes still fixed on the male. Let's hope so. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of shouting, men somewhere in the distance. The forest had changed again, shifting from peaceful to hostile in a matter of hours. Malik knew the night ahead would test them all. Inside the shelter, the female Fossa stirred again, her eyes opening wider this time. She looked weak but alive. Her mate let out a low, soft sound, something that almost resembled relief. Malik leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. He had no idea what would happen next, only that he was in the middle of something much bigger than a rescue. It wasn't just about saving one life anymore. It was about protecting them all, from nature, from humans, and from the chaos that came when both worlds collided. The forest whispered outside, restless and waiting as the night began to fall once more. The forest was darker now, drenched in heavy rain that blurred Malik's vision and muffled every sound except the rhythmic drumming on the leaves. The male Fossa stood beside him, drenched but unyielding, his golden-brown fur clinging tightly to his body. The injured female lay weakly near Malik's legs, shivering slightly. Her breathing had grown uneven. Each exhale sounded heavier than the last. Malik's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of her struggle pressing into his chest. He knew that time was running out, and yet the forest around him was closing in like a trap. The storm was turning paths into rivers, roots into slippery death traps, and visibility into a nightmare. Hang on, Malik muttered under his breath, kneeling beside the female. We're getting out of here, I promise. He didn't know who he was trying to convince, the animal or himself. He reached for the rope he always carried, his fingers trembling from exhaustion and cold. He fashioned a makeshift sling, using his jacket to wrap around her body for protection. The male Fossa growled nervously as Malik approached, but he didn't attack. He just watched, eyes flicking between Malik's hands and his injured mate, as if ensuring every move was safe. Malik slid his arms carefully under the female and tried to lift. She was heavier than she looked, her body limp from shock. His muscles screamed in protest, and his soaked clothes clung to him like chains. He gritted his teeth and hoisted her up, balancing her across his shoulders. The male followed closely, tail twitching, eyes glowing faintly through the rain. Step by step, Malik pushed through the forest, slipping, sliding, and stumbling over wet roots. Every few minutes, he stopped to catch his breath. The storm had no mercy. The wind whipped through the trees, howling like a wounded beast. Branches snapped and fell around him. His radio was still dead, and his flashlight flickered, running low on battery. He could barely tell which direction he was heading anymore, but the Fossa seemed to know. The male would stop ahead of him, glance back, then move again, as though guiding him. Malik followed that silent guidance, trusting the creature's instinct more than his own. He had read about animal intelligence, but this was different. There was an awareness, a connection he couldn't explain. In the middle of a storm, surrounded by danger, a human and a predator were moving in sync, both driven by the same goal, saving her. Hours seemed to pass before Malik finally stumbled into a small rocky overhang, a half-cave that provided some shelter from the rain. Exhausted, he lowered the female gently onto the dry patch of ground inside. The male immediately came closer, sniffing her wounds, licking her sides softly. Malik collapsed beside them, breathing heavily. He tore open his small field kit, fumbling for antiseptic and gauze. The wound on her leg was bad, a deep cut maybe from sharp rocks. Infection was the biggest threat now. As he cleaned the wound, the female hissed weakly, but Malik murmured softly, "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you." His hands shook, not from fear but from fatigue. He wrapped her leg as tightly as he could, securing it with strips of fabric torn from his undershirt. The male watched him closely, his breathing low and tense. When Malik leaned back, signaling he was done, the Fossa stepped forward and sniffed her leg again, then looked at Malik with eyes that seemed softer, almost grateful. Thunder rolled overhead again, and the forest responded with eerie silence. Malik stared out into the rain, realizing how deep they were. Even if the storm ended, getting out wouldn't be easy. His GPS had failed earlier, and his team would have no idea where he was. He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "I guess it's just us now." He turned back toward the two animals. The male Fossa was lying beside his mate now, body curved protectively around her. The sight stirred something deep in Malik's chest. "You'd risk everything for her," he whispered. "And people say animals can't love." Hours passed. The rain softened into a drizzle, and darkness thickened around the forest. Malik used his lighter to start a small fire with whatever dry twigs he could find. The flame flickered weakly, but gave enough warmth to keep them all from freezing. The female's breathing had steadied a little, though her eyes still fluttered with pain. Malik leaned against the cave wall, exhaustion pulling at him. Before long, sleep claimed him. He didn't know how long he was out, but a sudden growl snapped him awake. The fire was low, nearly out. The male Fossa was standing at the cave's mouth, ears perked, body tense. Malik reached for his flashlight and pointed it outward. Two glowing eyes reflected back at him, not the Fossa's. They were larger, higher up. Another predator. Malik's pulse shot through his veins like lightning. "Oh no," he whispered. A Phanoloca, a smaller but vicious carnivore, stepped into the light. It bared its teeth, drawn by the scent of blood from the injured Fossa. The male growled, his body lowering, ready to defend. The female tried to lift her head, but whimpered in pain. Malik knew this could turn deadly fast. He reached for the flare in his belt and struck it. The red flame burst to life, filling the cave with harsh light. The Phanoloca hissed and retreated slightly, but didn't leave. It circled the entrance, eyes locked on the female. Malik shouted, waving the flare, "Get out, go!" The male Fossa lunged suddenly, snarling, and the wild intruder bolted into the rain. For a few tense moments, silence returned. Malik's chest heaved, and he dropped the dying flare. "That was close," he muttered. The male stood at the entrance a bit longer, making sure the danger was gone, before returning to his mate. Malik stared at him in awe. The courage, the loyalty. It was something beyond instinct. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Mist rose from the forest floor, and sunlight filtered through dripping branches. Malik checked the female's leg again. The swelling had gone down slightly. It was a good sign, but she still couldn't walk. He knew he had to contact his team soon. But the only way to do that was to climb the nearby ridge and get above the canopy. He hesitated. Leaving the Fossas alone was risky, but he didn't have a choice. He looked at the male and said softly, "I'll be back." "Stay with her." The Fossa tilted his head, as if listening. Malik grabbed his backpack and started climbing the steep ridge, his boots sinking into wet soil. Every few steps he looked back. The male was still watching. The climb was brutal. His hands slipped on moss-covered rocks, his lungs burned, and every muscle screamed. Finally, he reached the top, where sunlight hit his face for the first time in hours. He pulled out his radio and tried again. "Base camp, this is Malik. Do you copy?" Static filled the air. He adjusted the antenna. "Base camp, it's Malik. I've found 2 Fossas, 1 injured. I need immediate medical and extraction support." A few seconds of silence. Then, "Copy that, Malik. Hold your position. Team will move to your coordinates. Can you signal smoke?" "Yes, I'll light it now." Malik exhaled in relief. lighting a signal flare that sent a thin column of orange smoke rising above the trees. He smiled faintly. They would find him soon. But as he started climbing down, a distant roar echoed through the forest below. His stomach turned cold. That wasn't thunder. He rushed down, branches whipping his face, heart hammering. When he reached the cave, the sight froze him in his tracks. The male Fossa was snarling fiercely, standing between his mate and a large boa constrictor that had slithered in, its thick body coiled near the entrance. The snake's tongue flicked, tasting the air, its eyes fixed on the injured female. "Not again," Malik whispered, dropping his pack and grabbing a fallen branch. The male lunged, biting the snake's tail, but the boa struck back, wrapping around him with terrifying speed. The Fossa let out a guttural cry, thrashing wildly. Malik charged forward, swinging the branch. The wood cracked against the snake's scales again and again, but it didn't let go. He had to act fast. The male's breathing was already choking. He grabbed his knife and slashed across the snake's side. The reptile recoiled, loosening its grip just enough for the Fossa to break free. The snake hissed, retreating slowly, before slithering back into the undergrowth. Malik fell to his knees, panting, his hands shaking. The male Fossa limped toward his mate and collapsed beside her, wheezing but alive. Malik wiped his face, trembling. "You're insane," he muttered, half laughing, half crying. But brave. He reached out slowly, and for the first time the Fossa didn't back away. It looked at him, eyes heavy but calm, as if acknowledging him, not as a human, not as a threat, but as a part of their story. The sound of distant helicopter blades cut through the air. Malik looked up, spotting a small dot moving closer above the canopy. Relief washed over him. He turned to the Fossas, smiling faintly. "They're coming. You'll be safe soon." But deep inside, Malik knew this wasn't the end. The female was still weak, the male barely breathing, and the forest. The forest never truly rested. Something told him the wild wasn't done testing them yet. The helicopter's sound grew louder, chopping through the mist that hung over the forest. Malik waved his flare one last time, signaling the rescue team. But even as he watched the orange smoke spiral into the sky, something in his chest felt uneasy. He turned toward the two Fossas, the male breathing heavily, the female barely conscious, and for a fleeting moment he wondered if they would even survive the flight. The forest around them was calm now, but that calm didn't feel safe. It felt like the pause before another storm. The helicopter finally descended, sending leaves spinning in every direction. Two medics jumped out, crouching as they ran toward Malik. "We got your signal." "Where's the injury?" one of them shouted over the roar of the blades. Malik pointed toward the female Fossa. "She's badly hurt. Leg fracture, possible internal injuries." The male's weak too, but not critical. As the team moved in with stretchers and tranquilizers, the male Fossa suddenly growled, rising weakly to his feet. He stood in front of his mate, baring his teeth. The rescuers froze. Malik raised his hand quickly, shouting, "Wait! Don't move!" He knelt down slowly, meeting the Fossa's eyes. Rain dripped from his helmet, his voice calm but firm. "It's okay. They're here to help her. I promised you she'd live, remember?" For a long moment the animal didn't move. Its chest rose and fell rapidly, eyes burning with protectiveness. Then, to everyone's shock, the Fossa took a step back. The medics exchanged glances, quickly moved in, and sedated the female before carefully placing her onto a stretcher. Malik exhaled, his shoulders slumping from relief. "You did the impossible, buddy," he whispered, placing a hand gently on the male's fur. "You trusted me." The helicopter lifted them from the heart of the jungle, leaving behind the soaked ground, broken branches, and memories of a night that felt like a lifetime. Malik sat inside, eyes never leaving the two Fossas lying side by side. The wind howled around them, the forest fading into a blur of green below. Hours later, in the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the female Fossa was stable. Her leg had been treated, and her breathing was normal again. Malik stood by the observation glass, watching quietly as she rested in a heated enclosure. The male was in the next enclosure, still weak but alert. He kept his eyes fixed on her through the glass wall that separated them. One of the veterinarians, Dr. Rania, stepped beside Malik. "I've never seen anything like this," she said softly. He refused to eat until he saw her moved here. "Even now, he only relaxes when she's in sight," Malik nodded slowly. "It's like he's her strength." Weeks passed, and the story of the rescue spread across media networks. People couldn't believe it. A wild predator had sought human help to save its mate. Videos of the event, captured from the rescue team's cameras, went viral. Thousands commented about how love, loyalty, and courage weren't limited to humans. For once, the internet wasn't filled with outrage or argument. It was filled with awe. But Malik didn't care for fame. Every day, he returned to the center just to check on the Fossas. Over time, both of them grew stronger. The female began walking again, her limp faint but manageable. The male stayed close to her, always a few steps behind, always watching. Then, one morning, Dr. Rania approached Malik with a soft smile. "It's time," she said. "They're ready to go home." Malik's chest tightened. He had known this day would come, but it didn't make it easier. Together, they transported the Fossas back to the same forest where everything had started. The air was clear that morning, sunlight dripping through the canopy like gold. The forest smelled of wet earth and life. Malik opened the cage slowly. The male stepped out first, pausing to look back at him. Then the female followed, moving gingerly but confidently. For a moment they stood still, the wild around them, the human behind them. And the line between the two worlds felt thin, almost invisible. The male turned his head one last time, meeting Malik's eyes. It wasn't fear or confusion in that look. It was something far deeper, recognition. A silent thank you that words could never express. Malik felt his throat tighten. "Take care of her," he murmured, voice barely audible. "You did your part." "And so did I." The Fossas disappeared into the trees, their rust-colored fur blending with the forest shadows. The sound of their movement faded until the jungle swallowed them whole. Malik stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where they had vanished. The forest was alive again, birds calling, insects humming, leaves rustling in rhythm with the wind. He finally turned to leave, his boots pressing softly into the damp soil. And as he walked, one thought echoed in his mind, a truth that would stay with him forever. The wild had a language, one of love, loyalty, and trust. But only those who listened with their hearts could understand it. Weeks later, Malik gave a talk to young rangers and volunteers. He told them the story not as a tale of danger or bravery, but as a lesson. "That Fossa taught me something I'll never forget," he said. "In the wild, everything fights for survival, but not everything fights for itself. Sometimes it's about protecting something you love, even when it means risking your own life. And if an animal can do that, what's stopping us from being kinder, more loyal, and more human?" The room fell silent. Every face in the audience was still, eyes reflecting something deeper, respect, empathy, reflection. Malik smiled faintly and ended his words with a quiet reminder. The world doesn't just belong to us. It belongs to every heart that beats with courage, whether it walks on 2 legs or 4. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere deep within the forest, a pair of Fossas moved together under the same sky, stronger than ever, living proof that compassion had no species. Moral lesson: love and loyalty are not exclusive to humans. They live within every creature that breathes, every bond formed in the struggle to survive. True strength lies not in dominance but in compassion, in reaching across fear to protect what matters most. And sometimes, even in the wild, it takes a predator's heart to teach mankind what it truly means to be human.